Hello everyone, and welcome to another edition of The Rabbi Speaks. I'm Rabbi Abba, Perelmuter, your host, and for the next several minutes I would just like to talk to you about some issues that I hope that you will find valuable and inspirational in your life. There has been an old tradition in Judaism that we read the 5 books of Moses, the first 5 books of the Bible, annually. We split it up into 54 different sections, and every Saturday morning at temple during the service, we read one of those sections. So the purpose is, of course, to go through the entire Torah once a year. And while we're reading the Torah portion of that particular Saturday, we also try to study it, not only to listen to the words, but try to get a little bit of a deeper meaning into what the story is really trying to tell us. Recently, we finished the last cycle and we begin all over again, back to the beginning of Genesis. And I wanted to talk to you today about 2 important people in the Bible who really made up a large part of the first beginnings of these 5 books of Moses. I'm talking about Noah and Abraham. Noah we're all familiar with. If we ever went to Sunday school, we're familiar with the story of Noah, how the entire world was corrupt. There was tremendous aggravation given to God, and eventually he decided that he was going to destroy the world. But he wanted the world to continue, so he looked around for who he can choose as his representative, who was loyal to him. And he found this fellow Noah. As it tells us in one of the verses, and Noah found favor in the eyes of the Lord. And he came to Noah and he said to him, Noah, I would like to ask you to please build an ark for yourself. And when Noah thought to himself, what is an ark? God explained, it's a huge boat that I want you to build. And into this boat, I would like you to invite all different animals from every species, male and female, 2 of each animal. And when Noah looked at God, after figuring out exactly what God wanted, he said to him, what is the purpose of me doing this? And God said to him, because I am finished with this world. This has become too corrupt, too violent, too immoral and unethical, and I want to destroy the world. But you, Noah, you have found favor in my eyes. You're a good man, and I want to save you and your family. Therefore, I'd like you to build this boat for me. For on this earth, I'm going to cause a flood. Well, Noah took his good time, because it tells us in the book that it took him 120 years to build the ark. 120 years. Noah strove and bought some wood, put it together, figured it out, and eventually, after 120 years, God placed him and his children and their wives into the ark, together with all of the animals, and then eventually God brought the flood onto the world, which destroyed all of mankind except Noah. Noah comes out of the ark and begins to rebuild humanity from his own family. The rabbis in the Talmud in the ancient times had a very tough and a difficult time placing their arms around Noah. Who was he? What was he? Because he doesn't say much. He's what we call silent Noah. Only at the end of the story do we find an incident where his son Ham came into the room and found him spread out naked on the bed, and eventually laughed it to his brothers, who then came in and covered Noah. Do we actually hear Noah saying something? And he curses Ham and blesses the other 2 brothers, Shem and Yefet. But until that moment, throughout the entire episode of the flood, Noah is silent. He says nothing. We don't know what's going on in the man's mind. We don't know what he's feeling. Is it fear? Is it excitement? Is it trepidation? What's going on? What is happening to Noah? And we know nothing about him except that he is loyal. He's a loyal, and he probably was a loner, because we don't find that he asked for anybody's help in building this ark. Nor did he go out to God and say to God, listen, God, I know you're angry with the world. I know you don't care about this world and you want to get rid of all of these people. But maybe among all of these people, are you telling me among the millions of people, there's nobody else to save the world except me and my family? We're the only righteous people? So therefore, the rabbis have a tough time in giving him his right status. Where does he fit in? Is he among the giants in the Bible? Can we compare him to Abraham, to Isaac, to Moses, to David, and to Solomon, one of the big ones? Or do we say, nah, you know what? Noah, compared to the giants, is only a midget. Sure, in his time, when everybody else was evil and bad and wicked, Noah was kind and gentle and moral. But if had he come up against Abraham, would he have been in Abraham's generation, Noah would have not matched up to him. So we don't know. There's some that figure Noah giant, and some figure Noah shadow of Abraham. But he becomes a mystery. But one thing we do know, that Noah did all of this by himself. He didn't go out to God. He didn't plead. He didn't try to save the world, because ultimately the world was destroyed, but for Noah and his family. We have an expression in Yiddish that calls Noah a tzaddik in pelts. What does a tzaddik in pelts really tell us? It's a righteous person dressed up in a fur coat. What do I mean by that? There are two ways how you can warm up a room when you're cold. One way is going out into the street, finding a store, buying a fur coat, paying good money for the fur coat, bringing it back into the room and putting it on. It warms you up. You feel great in that wool coat. It's warm, you're comfortable. But what about everybody else around you? What about the rest of the world? Well, no. I just know that I have to take care of myself. I know that I have to save myself and my family, and I buy them wool coats as well. What about your neighbor? What about the person down the street? They have to fend for themselves. That was Noah's attitude. Noah was righteous, and he was moral, and he was ethical, but he was ethical for himself and for his family. And even though that God did choose him to save mankind and through him rebuild the world, it wasn't the perfect way to do it. Noah should have at least tried to save some part of humanity. He was warm, but he could have warmed somebody else up. Unlike other people who, instead of buying a fur coat for themselves, go out there and they chop down a tree. They bring the tree into the room and they cut it up into logs. Then they build a fireplace. They put oil on it, gas, and they light the fire. What happens then? I'm warm, and everybody else around me is warm as well. Isn't that a better attitude? Noah saves the world, but only himself. This other person builds a fire and makes everybody warm. This is the difference between the two gentlemen that I'm talking about today. Even though Noah, moral, loyal, really cared about God, but only took care of himself. When Noah came out of the ark, it was very interesting. It tells us the first thing that he planted was a vineyard. And you think to yourself, why would he have planted a vineyard? Why the first thing of everything else? But I could imagine. Think about Noah's psychological well-being in the ark. He spent a year there with his children and all of these animals. He didn't have any contact with the outside world. God had promised that he was going to destroy everything. When that door of the ark opened up, when Noah took the first steps out of the ark, what was he feeling? What did he think? Well, one, I think he felt fear. He felt, oh my gosh, look at this. The entire world is empty. It's quiet, eerily quiet. No birds are chirping, no animals are running, nothing is happening. Very, very quiet. So one, he must have felt fear. How is he going to be able to accomplish what God wants him to do? And that's rebuild humanity. And second, I have a feeling that Noah felt tremendous guilt. Coming out into the world and seeing all the devastation, everything gone, all humanity wiped out. And here he and his family are alive. He must have felt a tremendous amount of guilt of not doing something. We recently had here a hurricane that passed through the Gulf Coast called Katrina. And we were able to see on the television all of the devastation. And we sat there open-mouthed thinking to ourselves, oh my God, how can I help? What can I do? And we sent hundreds of millions of dollars to help the victims of Hurricane Katrina. Noah coming out of that kind of devastation, which was 1,000,000 times worse than the hurricane in New Orleans, must have felt a tremendous amount of guilt. And there's different ways how to deal with guilt. One of them is drinking. One of them is alcohol. And I have a small feeling that the reason why Noah first planted the vineyard is because he needed something to get through the day. He needed that wine to make him forget the past year of where he spent and with his family in the ark, and then coming out and seeing this tremendous devastation. Because I'm sure that Noah must have had uncles and aunts, grandparents, brothers and sisters, nephews and nieces that were caught up in the flood and weren't around. And I think that might be a reason why Noah planted it. It didn't lead to good things, because as I mentioned to you previously, Ham found his father naked and drunk on the floor of his tent, and then he was cursed. Later, one of Noah's great 10 generations later, a new person is born. Abram. Abram we know a lot more about. Abraham was born to an idol worshipper. His father was Terach. Terach not only worshipped an idols, not only was he a pagan, not only was he popular in that part of the world, but he was a merchant, an idol manufacturer and an idol merchant. And Abraham grew up in this kind of a society. Everybody worshipping different gods, everybody having their own deity, everybody worshipping something else. And Abraham thought to himself, this can't be true. This can't be real. I cannot get myself to worship the sun. Why? Because what happens when at night? Where does the sun go? What if I need something in the middle of the night? There's no God to pray to. I can't worship the moon, because what happens when the sun comes up? The moon disappears. So it certainly couldn't be any of those natural entities. Not the wind, not the rain, not the clouds, not natural phenomena, because they come and they go. Certainly couldn't be any rocks. What good would they do? So there must be something Abraham came up with. There must be some entity that controls all of this. Somebody somewhere up there in the skies that has viewed this, that has created this and controls this. And of his own volition, out of his own understanding, Abraham came to recognize the Almighty. Came to bring the belief of monotheism, the belief in one God, back to the earth. God didn't appear to him. Doesn't tell us anywhere that God appeared to him before he realized this. And once he realized this, he said, as not only is there a creator, and not only is there someone that runs everything, but he cares about our actions. You see, there are two types of people that believe in God. One is the belief in God as an absentee landlord. God is way up there in the skies, far, far removed from us. Yes, he did create us. And he has the power, but he doesn't really care what goes on in this world. He lets the people do whatever they want. They want to fight. They want to love. They want to eat. He doesn't care. He's out there and we're left down here. Then there's the other belief in God, that he has a vested interest in this world, that he cares about each individual. Even though that there are 6 billion people on this earth, he cares about me and he cares about you. Because it's very difficult for a person to get excited about worshiping God or about keeping the commandments in the Bible. We as Jews who believe that the mitzvot, the commandments are still relevant today, keep as much as we can within the mitzvot, within those commandments in the Bible. And one of them is the mitzvah of kashrut, of keeping kosher. And there's a prohibition in Orthodox Jewry and Judaism about eating milk and meat together. So it's a no-no to eat a cheeseburger. Never had a cheeseburger. People look at me incredulously, you've never had a cheeseburger? I say, no, I follow the rules of the Bible, I follow the rules of kashrut. So people ask me, Rabbi, come on, let's be honest. There are 6 billion people here in the world. There's a lot of things that are going on. There's wars, there's natural disasters, there's calamities, there's all of these things. God is busy with the big picture. Do you really think that if you drove to an In-N-Out, walked in there, bought a double, sat down and enjoyed it, you think God would really care and would be angry with you because you didn't keep the rules of kashrut? Who has time to follow 6 billion people? Now, for most people, that's a good argument. Who has time to worry about each individual person? You think God cares about the little guy, what we do? Yeah, he's worried about the big picture, the United Nations, all these things, peace treaties. But I say no. I say God cares about every one of us and worries of how we act and how we live our lives. So even though in the big global scheme, would the world completely blow up if I ate a double-double out of the In-N-Out burger? Probably not. Probably not, but I never take my chances. Who knows? But what I do know is that God cares about me and watches me and worries about me and wants me to fulfill my destiny here on earth. Where do I get this philosophy from? Where do we get all of these ideas? From the first Jew, Abraham. The first one that came into the world and brought the relevance of God back down. Until then, they had completely forgotten. They were worried about rocks and worshipping all these kind of deities that didn't help them, that didn't care about them. And Abraham revolutionized that. He came with an unbelievable new message. Well, do you think the authorities were happy with Abraham? Oh, no. No authorities ever happy with a revolution. Because Abraham came and he said to the people of the earth, don't listen to this guy who's telling you to worship idols. And they tell a story that I've once told you before, ladies and gentlemen. His father Terach went to find a new supplier for the idols. And probably went somewhere to the Far East, or who knows, Taiwan, Korea, find a new manufacturer for idols. And he made Abraham in charge. Well, Abraham is overseeing this big store of idols. And the first woman comes in and says, Mister, I'm looking for a deity that's going to help my arthritis. And Abraham says, so what are you doing in here? Pray to God, He's going to help your arthritis. You don't need any idol here. A few minutes later, a young couple comes in and says, Abraham, we need a blessing for fertility. We need an idol that's going to help us conceive a child. And he says, what are you, crazy or something? Get out of here. Go home. Pray to the one God who holds all of the blessings in His hands. He will give you a child, not any of these idols here. And another guy comes in and says, Abraham, my team has not won the World Series since 1908. All these years they haven't won the World Series. I'm a Chicago Cubs fan. Help me, Abraham. I need an idol to help the Cubs win the World Series. And Abraham says, what are you, crazy or something? No idol here is going to help you. Go pray to the one God who cares about you, and He's going to help you and fulfill your needs. And then Abraham took a stick. And with this stick, he smashed all of the idols that were in the store, completely destroyed all of the inventory except one idol. This one big idol, Abraham took the stick, placed it in the idol's hands, took a big bowl of fruit and placed it in front of the idol. When his father came in and saw that his entire inventory was wiped out, he said to Abraham, Abraham, what's going on over here? So Abraham says, Dad, you wouldn't believe what happened. All of these idols were ready and very hungry. And they clamored for food. So I brought this big bowl of lunch for them, and I placed it in the middle of the room. Everyone was fighting with each other to get to the food. When this big idol with the stick in his hand went and he smashed all of the idols, and he took the bowl for himself. His father said, Abraham, are you crazy? What have you been smoking lately? Come on, you expect me to believe this incredible story that you're telling me? Don't you realize that these idols don't move, they don't walk, they don't talk, they're not hungry, they don't need lunch? So Abraham says, Dad, if that's what you're telling me is true, that they don't do any of these things, then why are you worshiping them? What good are these idols to us? They're useless. Only believe in the one God. But Terach was too entrenched in his own belief and told the king about Abraham. Well, the king took Abraham and he said, my friend, do you believe what we believe? And Abraham said, absolutely not. I believe in the one God, creator of heaven and earth, who cares about everyone's moral and ethical being. And the king said, so we'll see how your God is going to protect you. And he took Abraham and he threw him into a fiery furnace. Well, for a few days, Abraham was sitting there. Of course, God created a miracle and sent angels to protect Abraham. And Abraham sat there. After several days, the king ordered the furnace to be opened up and looked inside. And oh my gosh, what did he find? Abraham sitting amidst a garden and an orchard of fruit. God had protected him. But Abraham was different than Noah. Even though that he also lived a moral and ethical life, just like Noah did. And even though that Noah also believed in one God as Abraham, Abraham was not happy keeping the secret to himself. Abraham went from town to town and village to village exclaiming that this is the truth. We need to believe in the one and true and only God, creator of heaven and earth. Remember I told you about the tzaddik in pelts? The righteous person wearing the fur coat? This was not Abraham. Abraham was the kind of a righteous person that went out and chopped down a tree and made everybody warm. He believed in God and made sure that he went around the entire world. There's a fantastic story that's told about him, that Abraham was actually the first hotelier. He created the first hotel, a paradise, an Eshel it's called. What was the purpose of this hotel? The purpose was that he placed it in Be'er Sheva. And people came by and stayed in his hotel, travelers. And Abraham fed them well. He gave them steaks and beef, and he gave them drinks and wine and beer, whatever they wanted. When it came at the end of the dinner, Abraham said, "Okay, I want you now to bless the Almighty." When they said, "No, Abraham, we want to thank you," he says, No thanks come to me. I want you to thank the one who has given us this food, creator of heaven and earth. Pray and bless him and thank him. When the person refused to do that, Abraham went up and he said, "Okay, well, if that's the case, where you refuse to bless the Almighty, I'm going to have to charge you. Listen, you're sitting here in the only hotel in this vicinity. You know what this meal is going to cost you? A steak and a beer, hundreds of dollars." When the person began to realize that it might pay for him to acquiesce to Abraham's demands and to pray to heaven and earth, the person converted and he said, "Yes, Abraham, I believe, I know that you are right, I care about." And this way, Abraham made hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of converts back to monotheism, back to the belief in God, where God became irrelevant, that people forgot about God. It wasn't their deal. No, we don't need it. We don't care about it. Abraham was the one that said, no. I'm not going to believe in things that can't help me. I'm only going to believe in the true and one God. And he traveled. But you know the interesting thing is? The interesting thing is, as more devoted and the more loyal Abraham became to God, God tested him more. God wanted to really see, is this guy for real? Can I believe that this is really a guy that's so dedicated and so loyal to me? So he tested Abraham through 10 tests. One I had mentioned to you, through the furnace, by throwing him in. And then God appears to Abraham and he says to him, Lech lecha. The first words that we have in the Bible telling us about God speaking to Abraham and saying to him, Lech lecha. Abraham, go forth. Go out into the world. I want you to leave your house, leave your father's home, go to a strange place. But that is going to be the place which I'm going to promise to give to you and to your children. Go to the land which I'm going to show to you. Well, it's not so easy to travel, because God had promised Abraham he would make him wealthy, he would make him a man of fame, and he would give him children. And traveling in those days minimized all of these three blessings. It's hard to make a living when you're traveling, going from one spot to another spot. It's hard to have children when you're traveling from one spot, because they didn't travel like we travel today, in the luxury of an aeroplane, maybe even first class. No. Abraham traveled by caravan, with camels and donkeys and sheep, and it was hard to travel, very, very difficult. So there was no living, and there was no children, and there's no fame. Just ask an army brat whose father travels from one base to another base. There's no chance to make any friends. It's very difficult. And this was a test to Abraham, to see if he would be loyal to God, or would he say to God, God, what are you telling me? You promised me all of these things and then you're telling me to go on to travel? But Abraham didn't even question for 1 second. He didn't hesitate for a moment. He got into that wagon and told his wife Sarah, God promised us to give us the land of Canaan. Let's go to the land of Canaan. Let us go down where God wants us to go. And he traveled back and forth into the land of Canaan. All of a sudden, while he's in the land of Canaan, God throws him another curveball. And God says to him, no, guess what? There's no food in Canaan. But God Almighty, you told me yourself to come down here. So why do you throw a hunger? Why do you make us hungry over here? Because God was testing him to see if he would be loyal. And God tests us every single day to see if we're going to be loyal. We who live in the Western world, under the three religions of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, all have the same founder. All we go back to the Bible is to Abraham. a man who was faithful and did exactly what God wanted him to do. And just like our father Abraham and our mother Sarah, where God kept testing them, they were childless for many years. And then finally Abraham got a child, Isaac, and God asked Isaac to be sacrificed on an altar. All of these were tests one after the other. And this is true about us as well. We, the people, the descendants of Abraham and Sarah, the ones that populate this part of the world and proclaim the one God, because we all believe in monotheism. We might have different beliefs within monotheism, but we all believe in the one true and eternal God. All that is made possible because Abraham, from his own volition, began this. But don't think for a moment, just because Abraham was loyal, that you are automatically fall into that category. God tests us. He tests us. Do we give charity? Are we good people? Are we moral and ethical people? Do we do things right? How would Abraham look at us if he came to visit our homes? If he was one of the holy guests that would come to our houses, what would he find in your house? Is your house an A-shell? Is your house an open house like Abraham had? Do you go out to your neighbors and try to be good to them and live a good life by example, so they see, oh, look at this person that's living down the street. Look at Perelmuter. He is really a descendant of Abraham and Sarah because he lives his life as Abraham and Sarah would want him to, by being kind and by being generous and by being the one that everybody in town knows, this is the person. Abraham was so loyal and such a loving person that even when there was a town of Sodom and Gomorrah where the people were cruel and degenerate and killed each other and killed strangers, and not only killed them but in the most horrible way, Abraham begged God to save them. Abraham begged God. He said, how can you do this? Maybe there are righteous people living in these cities. And God said, yes, if there are righteous people living in the cities, I will save them, but they couldn't find one. That is our grandfather Abraham, always looking at the goodness within people, always trying to find that silver lining in every cloud. And that's the way we must live our lives. To make Abraham and Sarah proud, to make sure that his life does not go down to waste, we make him alive today. And by living that kind of life, we can truly say and be proud that Abraham would come and say, yes, these are my children, Lord. I have been successful. You have been successful. Look how proud I am of them. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for tuning in today. And until next time, God bless you.
Hashem, ben chatzoi serkinu yafrichu,